Well, hi, Jocelyn. Thank you for being here with me today. I'm excited to talk a little bit more about FODMAPs and nutrition and all the fun stuff that we don't know enough about. So, if you don't mind sharing a little bit more about who you are and your background, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm a dietitian myself. I'm part of the team with FODZYME. We make a digestive enzyme for FODMAPs. I support all of our clinical strategy as well as the network of clinicians who are using FODZYME with their patients. So, really heavy into the FODMAP science and really helping folks learn their tolerances and how they can incorporate more foods into their diet without a lot of the digestive issues that I know many of us suffer from.
Yeah, so you understand the gastroparesis community better than most, which we appreciate. And I know that we have talked in the past, and our community talks a lot about the low FODMAP diet. And I myself experienced when I'm like, hey, I don't know what to eat. I got a paper on explaining what FODMAPs were and sent on my way for that too. So for somebody who might be new to the space, wondering what the heck we're talking about, do you mind sharing like what a FODMAP is, in some simplistic terms for for anybody to understand?
Absolutely. So FODMAPs are fermentable carbohydrates. They tend to trigger symptoms in the lower half of the digestive tract, and this is because they kind of pass through our digestive system without being kind of metabolized like we would be absorbing other kinds of carbohydrates. And so they get fermented in the colon mostly, and this creates a lot of gas and bloating, which can lead to a lot of those IBS-like symptoms or just
Mhm.
general discomfort. FODMAP itself is an acronym. It stands for fermentable oligosaccharide disaccharides and polyols. Within the oligosaccharide family, there's two different types of FODMAPs. There's the fructans and the GOS. These are longer chain carbohydrates. Within the disaccharide family, this is kind of a fancy way of describing the carbohydrate in milk, so lactose. And then in the monosaccharide family, there's fructose, which is a simple sugar. And then within the polyol family, there's two different types of sugar alcohols, and there's mannitol and sorbitol. So these are kind of the different groups, and each has their own slightly different mechanism of how they trigger symptoms, but in general, it's related to the osmosis. So they're drawing a lot of water into the colon, and also this fermentation by the gut bacteria, which then releases a lot of gas.
Explain that so much better than my doctor ever did. Thank you. Now, I know that some people are more sensitive, like myself, to some FODMAPs and not others. Is there maybe a reason for that, or is just something biologic that maybe just that's how it is, or is there something really scientific behind behind a reason for that?
Yeah, it can feel super random, right? The best way to kind of think about this is related to the way that FODMAPs are triggering symptoms. And so for some, this poor tolerance to FODMAPs can arise from microbiome disturbances. So maybe the gut
Mm,
microbes in the digestive tract are not optimal. And so that can kind of lead to some of these symptoms. Sometimes people will have visceral hypersensitivity, which is a really fancy
mm,
way of describing just extreme sensations around any kind of digestive sensations in
mhm.
their digestive tract, even if nothing negative is happening or nothing is harmful for the body. It can send this signal to the brain that something's really wrong, and I feel pain and um, a lot of discomfort. And then there can also be kind of coexisting conditions that might contribute to FODMAP intolerance. SIBO is a common one where you would see kind of delayed gastric kind of motility, slow motility
Mhm.
there, and that can lead to kind of excess FODMAPs just sitting in the digestive tract and more fermentation. With gastroparesis, you can also see something similar in that the food is just sitting in the digestive tract, and so the gut microbes have more ability to feed on it and release all of that gas. So everybody's different. Everyone's microbiome is composed of different things, and everyone's got kind of a different mechanism that's going on, and so that will often influence what's triggering for you versus someone else.
Yeah, it's interesting when I see people in our groups talking about foods, and you have people like myself who I don't really have too much trouble with like garlic and onion. Obviously, if I overdo it, but that's kind of normal for almost any person. And my level of tolerance is going to be different than the average person. But you have some people who cannot tolerate garlic and onions at all. They can't, it will just send them into a flare or just really, really being uncomfortable for a long time. So, just based on what you said with the like description of why someone might be sensitive and someone might not be, sounds very similar to why, FODMAPs aside, why some people with gastroparesis tolerate one thing and other people tolerate nothing. It's such a complicated thing when talking about food, and that's why we've wanted to really dive into more of like understanding how things work and why things work, because it's so confusing when you're new and you're like, "Hey, what do you eat?" And I'm like, "I don't necessarily want to share like a whole thing with you, because if it doesn't work, I don't know how to fix that for you. What works for me doesn't work for somebody else." And we share little bits. I've been sharing some foods and things like that, but the whole like, get ready with me videos or like what I eat in a day videos, I'm like, that's not going to work for somebody else in our group. And it's always a little confusing, I think, for all of us trying to figure things out when you're like, "Hey, what do you eat?" And it's like, I eat food group A. And they're like, "Well, I can't eat food group A. I eat food group C." And somebody else is eating food group B. And we're like, "Okay, well, what the heck is going on?" It's very confusing. Very
Yeah, I
confusing.
very much feel with you, and this is a lot of why I became a GI dietitian myself. I just found,
Hmm.
I like to say every patient is a snowflake, with GI issues, whether it's IBS or gastroparesis or anything else. It really takes individualized kind of diet personalization to figure out what works right for you, versus someone else, and I encourage everyone really to stay committed and learn your triggers, what you can tolerate, what you can't, rather than, cutting out more and more foods. That's really not the best approach, and we want to make sure you've got resources to understand how you can incorporate more in your diet.
Yeah, that's always helpful, and I know that's something like you wanna eat as much as you possibly can, and that limit is gonna be different for everyone. For me, hell, it's different every single day what I might tolerate depending on what's still sitting from the day before, just to what else might be going on that's triggering something in my stomach too. But it's just really, helpful to get all of that information, and really I've learned so much in the last few months just about nutrition, and I'm like, "Oh, I felt like I knew, a fair amount." And I'm like, "I didn't know that. Thank you." Like, I have new things to go, to try now. But I
Yeah.
think with FODMAP specifically, because it's such a recommended diet for gastroparesis, along with the low fat, low fiber, don't eat the skins on the vegetables, don't eat seeds, don't eat this, basically don't eat anything. But the gastroparesis diet itself sometimes can contradict some of the things on the, high FODMAP and low FODMAPs. And you might tolerate something that's high FODMAP, but you're eating a low FODMAP diet. And that's where things can get confusing. And I know in a previous episode, we kind of talked about the idea of almost like throwing out the list, but like not throwing out the list, right? So is there something you would recommend if someone's in that situation? You're like, "They told me to eat low FODMAP, but I don't tolerate the low FODMAP foods." Like, where would you first recommend starting? That was a very long question. I'm sorry.
No, it's such an important one. I know a lot of the foods that are, often recommended for gastroparesis can be high FODMAP, like
Mhm.
pasta, bread, crackers, even like a low-fat yogurt.
My
So
diet. Yes.
and those are all not only high FODMAP foods, but really nutritious foods. What I always try to emphasize too is that FODMAPs are healthy fibers. We really
Mhm.
want, you to be able to eat them and incorporate them into your diet. The issue is just that they're, causing symptoms. They're not doing any damage to the body. So, with folks who are, maybe recommended a low FODMAP diet, but have, trouble being able to follow it because they say this cuts out all the foods that I eat.
Mhm.
This is a lot of where enzymes like FODZYME can come in. The enzymes will break down, at least in our blend, our fructan hydrolase. So that would help you with the
Mhm.
fructans in wheat, garlic, onion, banana, a lot of kind of nutritious and generally like recommended foods for gastroparesis. They would also help with the GOS group of FODMAPs, so beans, legumes. Those might be a little bit less well tolerated, but if you do kind of puree them or blend it into something that's smooth, you could mix FODZYME in and help make it
Hmm.
low FODMAP and kind of a soft, smooth texture that might be better tolerated. And then there's also lactase in our blend, and so that would help you with yogurt, milk, anything that has dairy in it.
Hmm. Now, with digestive enzymes, to kind of talk a little bit more about how they work and like what makes FODZYME a little bit different than your average digestive enzyme blend. I know that when I first, saw I'm like a digestive enzyme, this means it's going to digest all the food for me and it's going to fix everything. Like, can you, I'll say, fix some of the misinformation about a digestive enzyme and really kind of tell us like what does it do? Because it doesn't necessarily fix your motility. It's not going to magically make everything, just start digesting. So for someone like myself, what would make that be worth trying for me, even though I
Yeah,
did already try it?
absolutely. If you find that you're doing, following all of the gastroparesis recommendations, but you're still experiencing symptoms like gas and bloating, or even like diarrhea or constipation or abdominal pain, enzymes can be an extra tool to almost layer on into your toolkit, let's say.
Hmm.
So the enzymes will break down FODMAPs in food. They're not working on the body at all. They're just going to break down the FODMAPs so that the gut bacteria have, less food to ferment and eat and release all of that gas. So they can be a great way to just test even and learn if FODMAPs are triggering for you. Enzymes are incredibly safe. They're just kind of fancy proteins.
Hmm.
Um, and, sometimes I say use FODZYME with a couple meals, see how you do. If you feel better, that's going to confirm A, that you are sensitive to FODMAPs, B, you can use FODZYME to tolerate those foods rather than try to restrict them or cut them out. So I think of it as kind of a therapeutic tool in your toolkit as you're trying to manage your symptoms. When it comes to something like poor motility or delayed gastric emptying, it's certainly not going to be working to fix that. But what it
Hmm.
can do is help you get more of a nutritious kind of plant-based or even higher fiber foods in your diet, which then can have beneficial effects for your gut microbiome and all of your other digestive processes.
Yeah. Now, I know for me, initially, just looking at different enzymes, I've taken tons over the years because, maybe you stop tolerating something or they stopped making it, or just maybe I got a little bit worse. So I felt I needed something different. What I really liked about this was that it's powder. It wasn't in a capsule. It just powder right onto the food. And just the fact that I didn't have to swallow a pill was enticing. Like just that alone, I really liked. But it's very different. I'd never seen anything like that before. No one had ever talked about putting the like enzyme right on the food. So that, to my understanding, would mean that the breakdown would start in the food before it even hits my stomach, or would I have to mix together and then, hit my insides to kind of do its thing?
No, it's an amazing question and so relevant to this conversation. The way that enzymes work is that they're working on the FODMAPs in food. So you're exactly correct. They start working as soon as they come in contact with the
Hmm.
food. That can even be outside of the body. And the reason why we're a powder is because we want to create as much contact or homogenization between the enzymes and food. So using
Mhm.
FODZYME, you sprinkle it on, put it on the first bite, or mix it in if you're able to. And that really allows for the enzymes to be most effective at breaking down FODMAPs. I would say, consider the analogy of enzymes as kind of a contact sport. We want to get
Mm.
them all mixed up and integrated, in the same way as you're chewing, salivary amylase gets worked into the food matrix. Your stomach mixes everything up and kind of churns it so that the enzymes can really work in and effectively break
Hmm.
down the FODMAPs. For any foods, even, if you're having a puree or a smooth kind of blended soup or smoothie, I know a lot of those foods are recommended for gastroparesis. You can
Yeah.
mix FODZYME in and almost like pre-incubate or, pre-break down the FODMAPs in any of those foods to render the smoothie low FODMAP. Or if you're
Yeah.
having hummus, mix it right in. That's a great way to, make a food that maybe you kind of somewhat tolerated, but we're worried about the FODMAPs, make it even more tolerable. What I
Yeah.
will say is, however, don't mix FODZYME into chunky food or something that's not a smooth, homogeneous texture, because the enzymes do start working as soon as they come in contact with the food, and they're kind of activated and then active for the next 30 minutes. So we need to make
Mhm.
sure that full homogenization can happen before that.
That makes sense. Now, so it can go in cold or hot. It doesn't really make a difference, or does it work differently in, or even room temperature foods versus, hot foods versus hummus, like what you mentioned before? It doesn't make too much of a difference?
Room temperature is ideal, but if mixed into
Mm.
something that's on the cooler side or warmer side, that's completely fine. They're pretty active, the range in temperatures. What we don't want to happen is for you to cook with FODZYME, because
That
above
makes sense.
technically 140 degrees, but the rule of thumb I share is just like if it's too hot for you, if it's going to burn your tongue, you
It's
don't want
too
to put
hot for it.
it
Yeah.
will denature the enzymes. So as long as it's ready for you to be eating, it's a fine temperature for FODZYME.
Okay. Now, is this something that you would say if you really like high FODMAP foods, right? But they do give you some symptoms, but they don't hurt your stomach, but you're dealing with like the bloating, some of the nausea, but you relatively tolerate it. Would you say that you'd only use it on those foods, or would it be something you'd use at every meal, even if it wasn't necessarily a high FODMAP meal? Like, is there a benefit in using it even though it's not a high FODMAP meal or
So
food?
the enzymes will only be breaking down FODMAPs. The reality is that most meals are high FODMAP. That's part of
Yeah.
why when you tell someone to follow a low FODMAP diet, they're like, I can't
What
eat
do I
anything
eat?
you currently eat. So, if you don't have any idea what your triggers are, if you don't know what's high and low FODMAP, instead of having to learn this entirely new vocabulary and all of the science, use it on most meals. Certainly, if there's meals that you already tolerate, you're fine with, you don't need to be using FODZYME on those. It's just that, generally, if you're starting out and not sure where to begin, it's an easy thing to use with any meal.
Yeah, I know. It's so interesting just to really think about how it works. And it's every time I look at something new where I'm like, oh, maybe this will be the thing that makes me feel better, because we're always searching for something, right? Searching for a new food that maybe won't hurt, or a new protein shake, or a new something, just that in the hopes of feeling better. Because more often than not, even like myself, who gets relatively stable and has a good amount of safe foods, I still am like, I don't really feel good after I eat. So like, what can I do? I really just love how this works with the foods so much differently than anything I had ever experienced before. Even just learning about it, and not even to the point of using it, but really just saying this has potential to work better than the other things I've tried just because of that direct contact. I'd never ever thought about, I mean, granted, it might not work the same because the formulas aren't the same, but like I never thought about opening a capsule, for like a direct hit on the food. That never ever popped into my head. And it might not have worked the same, but it's such a new concept because there isn't anything else like that on the market at all that I have seen. So it's very new.
Yeah, there really isn't. And, sometimes people are a little hesitant or wondering, what am I putting on my food? How do I explain
Yeah.
this to my friends? Rest assured, it doesn't taste like anything. It's not going to change, the texture or taste of your food. And for anyone asking, tell them that this helps my body digest these foods better. Like some people
Yeah.
find that they make a joke about it. It's like, I use this so that I'm not farting all day or something like that. Um, Otherwise, you can, just explain it and people really relate. I can't tell you how many times in the day when I say, what I do or what I work on, and everyone's like, "Oh, I need that. I need that." So, like, let's break away the taboo of talking about these things.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. It's everybody has occasional issues there. I can't think of one person that couldn't use like just the say travel kit of your emergency just to kind of throw a couple packets of something. Like we carry Gas X, people carry other medications like that. So it's a very similar idea of for the average person has occasional, upset stomach, I sound like a Pepto Bismol commercial with the upset stomach, diarrhea talking about that, but it's true. The average person goes through that, and this can be helpful in those situations. And, again, when looking at the high FODMAP and low FODMAP, I'm like, but I eat all of these foods. And then it's like you wonder, do I need to cut all of these foods out? So you kind of look at that, and then you're looking at the low FODMAP foods and you're like, but I can't, like, I know that I can't tolerate some of these foods. I've tried it. I don't digest them. And I think depending on the severity of your motility too, like we have some people that have 0% motility, so for them, this type of product might not do anything for them because they don't eat by mouth, or maybe they're only on a very particular liquid diet. So I think that for people who are still trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, or maybe they want to try something new in their diet, like I like dairy, but dairy doesn't always like me back. I know you had mentioned hummus before, and I had seen, I believe it was on your guys' Instagram account, where they poured the FODZYME in the hummus, stirred around, put it back in the fridge and got it later. I was like, damn, I never thought of that, and those are the things that it's like, maybe you loved hummus for so long, and then all of a sudden it's like, it just doesn't love you back. This might be the thing that could help you love it back. No guarantees. There's never a guarantee on anything, but if it's relatively safe, and, whether you have a dietitian or a doctor and you're like, I feel okay, everybody feels okay with you trying something new, if it has a chance to give you some happy foods back without really hurting you, I think it's worth a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when it comes to someone who might be on a more restrictive diet, or even, um, having an or a nutrition supplement, or those, protein shakes, those can often be pretty high FODMAP. A lot of
Mhm.
times they'll have FOS, which is kind of this added carbohydrate for fiber, or inulin. Those are great things to mix FODZYME in and see if you can tolerate them better, and really help you kind of
Interesting.
meet your nutrition needs. Because we know
Yeah.
that oftentimes that can also become just a challenge, when you're trying to get enough calories in the day, and it's
Mhm.
hard.
Yeah, and when you get to a point where, like, just everything is hurting you and you don't know what to do, and I will probably say this until I'm blue in the face, that we just do not get enough nutrition assistance. We don't There's not enough of you to go around, right? And, learning that there are specific dietitians for GI issues and not just like an average everyday dietitian. There's nothing wrong with seeing an every average everyday dietitian, but if the mechanisms of what's actually happening with your GI system, that extra layer of expertise and really understanding the disease process, can make a big difference for you. And it gets really, really depressing when you can't eat anything and everything is surrounded by food and every event is surrounded by food, and you're hungry, you want to eat something, and it gets really hard. So if there are options out there that might give you something back, unless you tell me it's going to really hurt me, if it's not in that space, I'm willing to make that try, to really say, well, let's see if this works, and maybe it will and maybe it won't. But that's gotten me, those moments have gotten me some good foods in the day of giving it a try.
It's so true, and our mission and why we exist is to help people enjoy the social and culinary benefits of food as well, not just manage symptoms, right? Food plays such
Yeah.
an important role in our
Hmm.
lives. Our founder created FODZYME because she has IBS herself, and
Hmm.
she found the low FODMAP diet effective, but very frustrating. She said, I want my body to tolerate these foods. I wanna eat these."
Hmm.
And she, developed FODZYME to solve her own problem, and now, she enjoys FODMAPs right and left, and, that's really kind of what drove her, and what we're so committed about helping others, be able to accomplish as well.
Yeah. I find the best products, apps, things are always from somebody trying to solve like their own problem and realizing that they're not alone in that. The best things come out of, somebody saying enough is enough. I need to do something about it. And that's great too, because that tells me that there's an extra level of understanding of what people with digestive issues go through. We with gastroparesis patients, we have, different struggles, but, there is an overlap with IBS, IBD, and, different digestive diseases that we're all kind of in that same space of like, what the heck do I do and what the heck do I eat that's not either going to cause bloating, nausea, diarrhea, constipation, vomiting. Like, one of us will be running to the bathroom. It just, you don't know what end it's going to come out of, and that makes it really hard. You don't want to go out and try new things. Even if you're in your own home, you might not want to try new things because that's just, it can be violent. It can be very painful. It can be uncomfortable. And that's not a way that any of us want to live. And it's just really great to know that there are people out there trying to, you can't necessarily solve the problem, but really trying to develop something to make it a little bit easier and give us a little bit of normalcy back. And that's just a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah, very much so. And the food fear and food anxiety is really severe. We often see it, in IBS, which is our core population that we often support, but also, across gastroparesis and others. And that food fear can in itself make symptoms even worse. When you have
Yes.
a lot of anxiety and stress around how will my body tolerate this? You're worried about where's the next bathroom.
Hmm.
Makes you more likely to actually have the symptom, um,
Yeah.
from the foods, even if, maybe if you were in a relaxed and kind of unstressed state, you might tolerate it better. So
Hmm.
we FODZYME can be a helpful tool to give you confidence and, really feel like my body is going to tolerate this food. Beyond
Hmm.
that, we always encourage someone, to try FODZYME and try your trigger foods in scenarios where, are low stress. You're really like set up in a good environment for you to test and learn how your body's going to respond. Don't try them, when you've got to go make a big presentation or something like that, because our body's reaction and those digestive sensations really are influenced by our psychology too.
Yeah, it definitely, I've said it so many times that when I get stressed, it goes right to my gut. I'm like, it was already broken. I didn't need it to go go sit in there either. Um, but I, you know, thinking about some of the next steps for somebody wanting to try this, what would be a like a realistic starting point for somebody who might feel overwhelmed with, both diets, with gastroparesis and FODZYME? Would you say that it would be to just talk to your physician or your dietitian that this is something you want to start and just kind of maybe track your foods for a little while to see what might be high FODMAP, because you might not even realize that your foods are high FODMAP, like you were saying earlier, with a little trial and error. Would you suggest just kind of starting it and seeing how it goes if symptoms improve?
We generally say start, certainly make sure that, your healthcare team doesn't have any concerns, especially if you
Hmm.
do have more complicated things going on. But the enzymes are really safe and, like I said, can be kind of a helpful learning tool and almost diagnostic to help you figure out if FODMAPs are the issue. Because FODMAPs are in most meals, there's really no harm and there's a lot to gain from using FODZYME, with your meals for 5 days a week. See how you feel, and then from there, you're gonna get some really valuable data, on any changes. So in terms of, logging, look at what you're eating, portion sizes, the symptoms that you're experiencing, throughout the rest of the day and try to connect the dots there. What I,
Hmm.
do wanna make sure is clear is that FODMAPs are generally responsible for symptoms a couple hours after they've eaten because they're triggering mostly in the colon, maybe a little bit in the small intestine. And so that's, a couple hours after a meal. If you're, nauseous, vomiting, having, really severe symptoms right after the meal, that's probably not a FODMAP related issue. It's not something that FODZYME would be able to help with. So if you have those, it doesn't mean FODZYME isn't working. It just means, we've got to think bigger
Something
picture,
else.
all the different strategies for you.
Yeah.
Those are some clues.
Yeah, I think that's helpful too, because again, with like, there are times when I eat something and it's been in my stomach for 5 minutes. I'm like, nope, that's bad. That did not go over very well, and that is not going to settle well. I don't even know if it'll stay down. But I've had other meals and other foods where, like you're saying, either like I eat something in the morning, in the evening, because of just the sluggish motility, that I start having symptoms a lot later. And I know we mentioned SIBO earlier, and it's been a little bit of a hot topic lately, especially because we've talked about it and other people are just like, is this possibly the thing that I've been dealing with that I wasn't aware that I was dealing with the symptoms and everything. So, um, I think that having that clue and to decide, is it immediate or is it later, maybe even the next day, could it still be FODMAP related? If it is for us, because the motility is so slow, that it still could be FODMAP related, even if you start having those symptoms the next day. That would maybe make sense with a gastroparesis patient.
Yeah, it very much could be. I mean, food takes upwards of 12, if not more hours to fully pass through our digestive
Hmm.
tract. So yeah, the timing is certainly going to vary between folks, but 12 hours later is not impossible.
Yeah, and we're all very bad at doing that. So, um, well, thank you so much for all this information. It was so good. Like I said, I learned more in the last however long we've been chatting than I did from my doctor when they were telling me to go on a low FODMAP diet. And that's really important just when making those informed decisions, because we feel like we don't have all the information all the time. And then you just get stuck and you don't know what to eat. You're afraid to make changes because you don't know what's going to work, what might be harmful, and just because you're not really you don't understand because you don't know what you don't know. So thank you so much. And we'll be sharing information about FODZYME and, where to purchase and all that stuff in the description below. And I imagine if someone has any questions, they could reach out to you guys as well. I know you're good at answering emails and stuff. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to share it with your group. And yes, we're here to support everyone and be as helpful as we can.
Thank you.